So much that has been written recently that's drawn on really good work in cognitive psychology has told us that we're prone to certain predictable errors or biases, and what we should do is find ways to avoid them. And that's absolutely right for some kinds of decisions. But I think it begins to break down when we apply those lessons to other kinds of decisions. One of the kinds of decisions that's been studied a great deal has to do with consumer choice. But if you think about that kind of consumer decision, you can either choose to buy this box or that box, but you're not in a position to actually transform or improve what's inside the box. You just buy this one or that one. There's something else about those decisions. When you go shopping, you're trying to make the best decision for you, for the enjoyment of you and your family perhaps, or if you're investing, you want the best returns for yourself, but you're not in competition with other people. So the thing that we've been told to avoid, avoid biases, avoid optimism, avoid overconfidence, makes a lot of sense when I cannot actually transform outcomes. But many decisions, including some of the most consequential decisions we make, are very different. You can transform and influence outcomes, and you do need to outperform rivals. I would say maybe 90% of what has been studied in decision research experiments fits very nicely into this first quadrant, where I cannot influence outcomes. I can make a choice, but I can't change the thing I'm choosing, and performance is absolute. But there are three others. If I just think about the ability to shape outcomes in many tasks, for example, maybe I'm trying to learn a language or trying to play the piano. I don't make a choice, do I want to be a good piano player or a not good piano player? I actually have to achieve that. Now, if I think of the other dimension, if I need to outperform a rival, if you and I are in competition for something, it's not good enough for me just to do well. I need to do better than you, and you're trying to do better than me, which really is the definition of strategic thinking. Many, many examples of strategic thinking involve game theory or other sorts of competitions, which are very elegant ways of modeling competitive interaction, but typically, in order to emphasize that dimension of competitive interaction, they've set aside the dimension of shaping outcomes. What's really interesting is if we come to the fourth quadrant, which combines, on one hand, the ability to transform outcomes, to exert control, and on the other hand, the need to outperform rivals. Now, I would submit you don't make lots of decisions like that, but the ones that you do make like that are oftentimes the very most consequential of all. Those are strategic decisions by leaders in organizations, in corporations, in government, in the military, in sports. And the great paradox is, those are the most consequential of all decisions, but they're the ones that have been the least studied. Why? Because they're not as easily amenable to neat laboratory controls and replicability. Be very, very careful when you use the word overconfidence. The way that the word is used most commonly in our everyday conversation is it is something that is attributed after the fact when something goes wrong. A company failed, oh, the CEO was overconfident. The team lost, gee, I guess they were overconfident. It's a great storytelling device. In decision research, they didn't fall into that trap. And in decision research, overconfidence means something else. It means confidence that is greater than what is objectively warranted. So if I believe that I can go out and run 10,000 meters in 40 minutes, and I've never come close to that in my life, and I don't, we might say, well, that was overconfidence. You had a level of confidence that exceeded what was objectively warranted. However, we also know that if every time I go out to run 10,000 meters, I say, well, gee, every time I've run it in 50 minutes, I guess I'll run it in 50 minutes again, I'll probably never run it a lot faster than 50 minutes. So we also know from a lot of things, including athletics, that if one has a level of confidence that slightly exceeds what's objectively warranted, that's not a bad thing. That's probably how you will improve your performance. Now, in that case, is that overconfidence or not? By one definition, it is overconfidence. By another, it's actually an appropriate level of confidence. And that's just in absolute terms. Now let's imagine I'm racing 10,000 meters against a whole lot of other people, and the point isn't to do better than I've done in the past, it's to do better than all of them. I will tell you that the person who wins that race has very likely had a level of confidence that day that exceeded what was objectively warranted, but was not just useful, it was actually essential from a competitive perspective. Control, is the ability to influence outcomes, to shape outcomes, okay? So if I'm running 10,000 meters, well, I'm the person who has to put one foot in front of another. I have control over that. I might not reach the score I want or the time I want, but I have control on that. There are other things for which we really have no control. And if you look at the, almost 40 years worth of experiments, it has been found that human beings believe they have control more than they really do. And we know that from experiments like picking lottery numbers or rolling dice. And guess what? We find out that people believe they can, change the way dice will roll or pulling a card out of a deck when really they cannot. And so we have a great tradition now that says, people suffer from an illusion of control. But if we change the experiment so that there's a range of control that you have, we find something very interesting. When you have a high ability, people actually underrate the control that they can exert. Why this is so important is that you may roll dice occasionally, you may play lottery numbers occasionally, but really most of your life is not exercising judgments about things about which you have no control. Much of your life is, how do I accomplish this task? How I'll drive my car? How I write this report? In every one of those, you actually not only have control, you probably have more control than you think you do. What I want to do with this work is say there isn't just one kind of decision. There are different kinds that call for different mindsets. There is a time when, in order to do good strategic thinking, you want to do the most careful, rational job, but you also need something else, and that is when you're leading others to achieve things that may be unprecedented, that they might not believe they could achieve. You need another kind of mindset, which is one that I call the right stuff, which is the ability to inspire and motivate people to go beyond what has been done before. Not in a reckless way. We're not talking here about bravado or denial or, living beyond the edge, but it calls for both. And I think what you see in many great leaders is the ability to have not just the one mindset, but the two, to understand that a couple very different approaches are needed and to be able to move back and forth among them.